1. This all started years ago. I was somewhere between 18 to 19 years old. I'm in my mid-20s now. At one of the numerous parties my best friend at the time, Dana, was throwing. With her being the first of our friends to get her own place, with her at the time boyfriend Mike, pretty much every weekend there was some sort of party going on at their place. And of course, her being my best friend, I was always there. As often as I went to her parties, there were only a handful of people I knew personally. But I suppose that's normal with her moving to a completely different town, about 45 minutes to an hour away depending on the traffic. I would typically work Mondays to Thursdays, and head to her place on Fridays, party Saturday, come home Sunday. It wasn't out of the ordinary for Dana and her boyfriend to try and set me up with people. To be honest, I was used to pretty much meeting a new guy every weekend. It was always the same line. "He's perfect for you. You're gonna love him." 9 out of 10 times, I wasn't interested. So this one particular party, I was having a grand old time doing shots in the kitchen with my tiny group of friends, then wandering out to the living room to socialize with all the new faces. I'm an extremely friendly and bubbly person, which is probably why my friends never worried about whether or not I would be uncomfortable on my own around the party. To this day, I have never met a person I didn't like at one of Dana's parties, except for Keith. I remember I had just finished playing beer pong with a group of new friends, and after losing by an embarrassing amount, I needed to cool it on the drinks and decided to plop down on the couch. I heard a friendly, "Well, hello," and turned to see a guy no older than maybe 24 sitting next to me. There was nothing creepy looking about him. In fact, it wasn't bad looking. Light brown hair with honey-colored eyes and a friendly smile. "I don't believe we've met," he said with a friendly nod and turned his body to face me. "I don't believe we have either," I smiled and held out my hand. "I'm Sleepy Optimist." We shook hands, and he told me his name was Keith. I was about to ask him if he was a friend of Mike's, since he was around Dana's boyfriend's age. And while I can't remember who it was, one of my friends at the moment had come over to drag me off somewhere. I honestly have no idea where we went, or anything seeing I was drunk, and this was years ago. But I remember quickly telling Keith it was nice meeting him, and I was sure I'd be seeing him around that night before prancing off with my friend. I didn't see him for the rest of the night, but didn't think anything of it. I was even crashing on their couch that night and didn't recall seeing him leave. But like I said, I didn't think anything of it. Flash forward a couple days later, my phone popped up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey, it's Keith from the other night. Bummed we didn't get to spend more time together." Frowny face. I read, and it took me a few minutes before I could even remember who Keith was. It wasn't out of the blue for me to get texts from people I'd meet at parties, being the social butterfly I am. However, whenever I do give out my number, I'll always do an exchange at that moment, so I can write down who it is. So after a little bit of small talk, him asking how gnarly my hangover was the next day, and me asking how his current day was going, I had asked him how he got my number. He said he had asked my friend for it when he was getting ready to leave and couldn't find me to ask himself. Assuming it was either Dana or Mike, I dropped the subject and started asking more about him and he about me. While I didn't necessarily see Keith as anything more than a friend, we began to talk regularly. He had the same sense of humor as I do, and he was a night owl like I was. He had quickly become one of my favorite people to talk to. A couple weeks later, I was at another party at Mike and Dana's. I remember it was Mike's birthday, and he wanted to do an 80s theme. So we all got dressed up and let the alcohol flow. It was honestly a blast. At the peak of my drunkenness, I had yelled over the music to Dana, who was right next to me, if Keith was coming at all. "Who?" she yelled back as we danced by hopping around and tossing her extremely teased hair. "Keith!" I yelled, and she gave me a weird look. She kept saying she had no idea who that was, and when I tried to describe him, she yelled she didn't know a Keith, and that confused the hell out of me. When she noticed my energy shift, she quickly said it was very likely he could have come with her friend Ryan. Ryan, since she was always bringing +1s or +2s. Immediately agreeing with her, I continued to dance the night away and down drinks I would be regretting the next morning. Ryan had actually stayed over that night, since she was in no shape to drive, so she took the couch, and I made a little nest on the floor. When I had woken up early that morning to get some water, Ryan was getting ready to leave since she had to be somewhere semi-early that day. And she had a lot of hairspray to comb out of her hair, and a lot of blue eyeshadow to take off. I had quickly downed my glass of water and remembered what Dana had said about Keith. I asked her if she was the one who brought Keith the other week, and she laughed and said she had no clue who the fuck Keith is. I gave her a brief rundown of who he was, and how we had been talking, and she apologized, and told me again that she didn't know a Keith. Well, that should have been at least a teeny bit of a red flag. I didn't think anything of it since I legitimately enjoyed talking to him. The first few months he was super cool. I had opened up to him about personal things I had gone through, particularly my rocky relationship with my dad and my past, messy, ugly romantic relationships. Keith was one of the only people I had really opened up to about one relationship in particular, where I was being abused and didn't even fully realize it until he pointed it out to me. I genuinely felt Keith cared for me and wanted the best for me. It was comforting. Not long after that, he started becoming more flirtatious with me. While I naturally have a somewhat flirty personality, even his advances were a bit much for me. I told him that I didn't want to give him the wrong idea because I wasn't looking to date anyone at that time and just saw him as a really good friend. He was clearly upset by the tone in his voice when I told him, but he said he understood, and he was glad we were friends. His texts and calls became a little more frequent after that. And while we really talked just about every single day, it was like the more I tried to explain I didn't see him that way, the more he pushed it on me. I started to pull back on talking to him because, as forward as I was being about my feelings, I was still worried that I may have been leading him on. During this time of me pulling away, Keith had found my MySpace, which I hadn't used all that much by that point. It was when everyone was beginning to switch over to Facebook. He would ask questions about my family and say things like, "In this picture, is that your friend?" The majority of the questions he asked, I knew I had previously told him about those friends or family members. But there were a couple that I knew for a fact I hadn't mentioned, and somehow he knew who they were and my relation to them. Particularly a picture of my nephew who at the time was still just a tiny baby. He said something along the lines of my nephew looking cute, but Keith knew his name. It struck me as somewhat creepy, but I tried to brush it off. Around this time, an old, very, very dear friend had recently come back into my life. His name was Max, and we were best friends when we were about 15. I had always had a crush on him, but was too shy to say anything, and after he moved, we lost contact. I randomly found him on Facebook, and while I was positive it was him, I sent him a message anyway, calling him my old nickname I had for him, with a ton of question marks and exclamation points. He was just as excited to hear from me as I was to find him, and things had instantly picked up where we left off. We spent all night messaging back and forth, and eventually texting, and then the all-night phone call started up again. As shitty as it was of me, I had intentionally stopped answering Keith's texts and calls when Max came back into my life. The way I saw it was, I had already lost him once, and I wasn't about to let that happen again. Late one night, while I was away at my uncle's for Thanksgiving, I was on the phone with Max and told him that I had always had the fattest crush on him when we were younger, but I was terrified to say anything because I was positive he didn't see me that way and didn't want to lose his friendship. He started laughing and told me that he felt literally the exact same way, and that's why he would always tell me my friend Shannon was cute, not to blow his cover. Feeling extremely bold in that moment of exhaustion, I told him I still felt that way, and when we had lost contact, I still thought of him and wondered what he was up to, and he said he felt the same. I was overwhelmed with happiness, and he said there wasn't anyone else he had connected with quite like that connection we had. At that moment, we decided to officially be a couple and started to figure out when I would be able to fly out to visit him. Things with Max were better than I could ever have imagined. Waking up to his good morning phone calls and texting all day, every day, until it was time to talk on the phone till we fell asleep. I was over the moon and had completely forgot about Keith. Christmas comes around and I call Max to wish him a Merry Christmas. He even passed the phone around so I could talk to his family, who I had also fallen completely in love with. We decided at the end of February I was going to fly out to spend a week with them. Late one night in the beginning of February, I got a call from Max's aunt. The moment my phone rang, I knew something wasn't right. We said hello, and when I asked if everything was okay, she burst into tears. Absolutely hysterical, telling me that Max had been in a car accident. I could feel my heart drop into my stomach, and I began to shake. I was terrified to ask if he was okay because I already knew the answer. I remember every single detail about that day and night. I remember feeling something was off. I hadn't heard from Max in a few hours other than a post on my Facebook saying, "I love you." I remember what I was wearing. I remember exactly where I was sitting and the position I was sitting in when I got the news. I remember dropping to the floor and having to use all my energy to pull myself up and crawl into my mom's bed and tell her what happened. I couldn't believe he was gone. I had lost my Max all over again. I didn't reach out to any of my friends for a long time, other than my closest friends who got the news and rushed to be by my side every second. It took me a while to come around again, but eventually, I started taking the steps I needed to heal. I started going on outings with my friends. I started to eat more. Something in my mind had clicked that Max would never have wanted me to waste my life like that. He always told me we needed to make the best of our lives and that we had so many adventures waiting for us. That day I decided to live my life to the fullest, not just for me, but for Max. Which eventually led to me reaching out to Keith and apologizing for basically ghosting on him, and that I hoped there were no hard feelings. He forgave me, and while I knew better than to reach out too much, we were on a good note. Here and there I would get texts from him, sometimes just to say hello, but mostly they were, "I saw this and it reminded me of you" texts, whether it would be something I liked or something related to one of our old inside jokes. Nothing creepy at that point. A few months later, I'd gone over to a friend's for dinner, and while she and I were doing the dishes afterward, my phone began ringing. I saw it was Keith, so I picked up and gave a friendly hello, but instead of a hello back, he was breathing heavily and moaning and even muttered a few sexual things he wanted to do to me. I remember I shrieked and laughed before screaming to stop because I thought he had dialed me by accident instead of whoever he was boinking at the time. I figured he would have been mortified and given me one of those "oh God, I'm so sorry" type of apologies, and we could go straight to laughing about it. But the breathing and moaning continued. and I froze in confusion and shock. When he came, he yelled out my name and let out a small chuckle, then tried to spark a conversation as if nothing had happened. "What the fuck was that?" I yelled, and he said he was surprised I didn't enjoy it. At that moment I was pissed. I told him, "Knock that shit off," before hanging up and going back to the dishes. After my friend let me vent about it, I felt a little better and decided that I would no longer reach out to Keith. On my way home, he sent me a text apologizing, saying he didn't know what came over him and it was drunken stupidity, blah blah blah. I told him if he ever tried anything like that again, we're gonna have a problem. He apologized again, and I thought that would be the end of that. That's when the dick pics started rolling in, along with more phone calls that I would either ignore and answer, then immediately hang up. And he had even sent a couple of videos. At that point, I should have told somebody about it, or gone to the police, or at the very least, changed my number. But I was an idiot, and didn't. It was the only cell number I had ever had at that point, and I didn't want to go through the hassle of giving out my new number and all that junk to the tons and tons of people who I enjoyed talking to, just because of one chode bag of a dude. The more I ignored Keith, the more aggressive he got. He would randomly send me pages of text explaining in detail why I was a bitch, a whore, a cunt, every name in the book he called me. He said it was disgusting of me to lead him on like that, and my family should be ashamed to be related to such an ugly whore. It was hurtful, but I brushed it off. I have a pretty thick skin and usually don't take things like that too seriously. When that approach didn't work, he got desperate. He sent me a text saying he was sorry and that he was afraid because he didn't know what he was doing or what had come over him. I told him he needed to get some professional help. When he said he wanted to die, I started to panic. I called him and asked what was going on. I've always been a person to help out others in need, no matter how bad our relationship is. After losing Max, I promised myself I never wanted anyone to feel that sense of loneliness that I felt. Keith was crying and saying he was ready to die right then and there, that he had bottles of pills and a handle of booze sitting in front of him, and it was taking everything in him not to down it all and be done with everything. I had never been so freaked out in my entire life. I sat on the phone with him for hours and listed off reason after reason to stay alive. He eventually calmed down and thanked me before apologizing again. I told him again that he needed to get some help, and that it was okay to ask for it. He said I was right, and that was the last I heard of him for the rest of that week. I went back to my normal life, and I thought things were A-okay in my life again. But of course, since this is LNM, Keith came around again. He went back and forth between aggression and desperation. One day it would be, "I don't want to live," and the next it would be, "You selfish bitch, I hate you." I was afraid, and I told a few friends about it, and none of us had ever dealt with anyone this unstable before. We were all equally freaked out and decided the next time he said anything, I was changing my number and telling someone who could do something about it. The very next morning, I woke up to an essay of a text message from Keith, telling me that everything I had ever said to him was a lie, and I disgusted him. Nothing new there. But then I kept reading, and I broke down. He went on to tell me Max got what he deserved, and that he had never been so happy to hear someone died, and that I should have been in the car with him. I should have survived so I could be the one to pull his body from the wreckage and have that memory burned into my brain forever. Insult me all you want, but the second you start to talk shitty about my dead boyfriend, you are done. While my dad and I don't have the best relationship, he was the first person I thought to call. He answered immediately, and when he heard me sobbing, he went into complete protector mode, asking what happened. I told him the whole story, and that I didn't know what to do. He told me to give him Keith's number and he would take care of it. The second we hung up, I sent him his number, and within a half hour, my dad texted me saying, "This is your new number, and your brothers and I are taking care of the rest of the problem." I'm the youngest girl in the family, and all of my brothers are over 6 feet. 2 of them heavily tattooed, and the other used to be in the Navy and is now a cop. I honestly have no idea what they said did to Keith, but after that I never heard from him ever again. A couple weeks after I talked to my dad, I looked up Keith on Facebook to block him and make sure he could never contact me on there. It's been years now, and I'm happy to say my life is as back to normal as it could be. I still have no idea who gave him my number or if he possibly had it already. It's possible that he was, in fact, a friend of a friend, but it's not likely. Dana and Mike have split since then, so I never got a chance to ask Mike about it. But I'm more than happy to move on from it. I don't know if his intentions were to just scare me, or if he would have done something much worse had it continued. So Keith, let's never, ever, ever meet again. 2. About 8 years ago, I was feeling the desperation of wanting a boyfriend. I started meeting guys, lots of them. I was pretty reckless when I was younger, didn't really care about my well-being. I had a lot of self-hate. I used to be a privatized cosmetologist for strippers in the town I was living in, Springfield, Oregon. I had a lot of girls wanting to have me do their hair. I liked that kind of work because I was able to meet guys. The wrong kind. I started a dialogue with this one guy, we'll call him Root Beer Owl. We would always instant message on Yahoo Messenger, or we would email via Yahoo. After a while, I felt comfortable enough giving him my cell number. Things escalated pretty quickly. Root Beer Owl and I were talking a lot. After about a month, I wanted to meet. I was getting very anxious, irritated that he was putting me off. I started flirting more to get his attention. It worked. He would want to see me nearly every night. I trusted him enough to let him know where I lived. People, in general, can be very deceiving and, quite honestly, most have a hidden agenda. After a few months of hanging out, I was starting to get irritated that he didn't want to be exclusive, monopolizing all my time, preventing me from making money, and instead tried coercing me with marijuana. I really started getting quite mad at this point. Didn't know what his malfunction was. I would express how I felt all the time, and it always fell on deaf ears. It would make me really irritated. So irritated to the point I would drop all communication for a few days. This specific night, Root Beer Owl and I were arguing via text. I told him I no longer wanted to see him, and for him to lose my number. I am at this point completely done with all the head games. I stand my ground and again express myself. The conversation was getting very heated. I told him I hope I never see you again. This pissed him off. He replied and told me, "You should change your address, bitch." I was very angry. I replied, "If you're threatening me, you'd best be prepared for the ramifications." Root Beer Owl laughed and quit replying. I honestly thought that was the end of the conversation. 3 hours later, it's about midnight to 1 a.m. I'm in the kitchen at the table getting stoned, talking to a girlfriend, at the kitchen table in the dark. We were having typical late-night girl talk about guys and witchcraft. It was the norm for us. Suddenly, I hear a huge crash in my computer room. I watch my cat Frodo, who is at this point just a kitten, run out of the room and into my bedroom, skidding into multiple chairs in the hallway before running under my bed. I knew something really scared him. I divert my attention from my disturbed kitten to my computer room that had a huge crash emanate from within. I am at this point pissed off. My girlfriend, who I was still on the phone with, heard everything. I still had my phone in my hand. I, without thinking, run out the front door yelling, ready to beat the fuck out of whoever was there. Nobody was there, but I felt watched. I ran back inside, locking the door behind me, and then look in my computer room and see my huge plate window shattered inwards, and I see a big rock embedded in the wall opposite the window. I inform my girlfriend, who I'm still on the phone with, of everything I'm seeing. She's freaking this whole time I'm on the phone with her. It is at this point she urges me to call the police. I tell her I will in a minute. Talk to me while I smoke another bowl and calm down. She giggles and indulges. After about 10-ish minutes, I tell my girlfriend that I'm going to call the police and hang up. I put all my marijuana stuff away, spray Febreze, and call 911. About 40-ish minutes later, a squad car shows up out front. I go to my breezeway door and wait for the police officer. He arrives at the front door. I turn on the outside light and greet him. He asks to come inside to look at the crime scene. I oblige and take him to the computer room, which is at the front of the house by the front door. He saw the window and then saw the rock. He stopped everything. He looked at me. He told me if I were sitting there, I would have been knocked unconscious and probably bled out from blunt trauma. It was at least a 2-pound rock. He asked me if I knew who did it. I showed him the texts I was sent, his phone number, and his Yahoo handle. For about 3 full weeks after this happens, this police officer makes it a point to stop by twice a week. The guy in question that threw the rock through my window, I haven't spoken to since, and never even want to see him. I recently moved back to the city where all this happened. 3. So this was when I was 16 or 17. I just moved to Florida. I'm from a pretty safe area. You can walk down the street and not have to worry too much about anyone fucking with you. Very small town. I was always warned about stranger danger and whatever, but I was never really scared to be out by myself. Well, I moved to Florida, so obviously there is a lot more crime here, and not the safest place for a young girl to be out and about. I lived in a pretty big town in South Tampa. I didn't drive at this time, and I was living with a friend who also did not drive. My parents were in another state. Long story. So having just moved to a different state, I wanted to get out and make some friends. There was a gaming shop not far from where I lived, maybe about 5 miles. I was pretty into nerd shit, so I decided it was a prime location to go make some friends. Not driving, I decided I would walk the 5 miles there in the morning, spend the day in the area, and walk the 5 miles back in the evening. There was a road that was a little secluded that I had to walk through to get to the main highway, and I ended up later naming it Rape Road. So on this particular day, I decided to head home before it got dark. I was walking on Rape Road, and this white pickup drove by and stopped and asked if I needed a ride. I'm normally not opposed to taking rides from strangers. I usually get vibes and go with them. I thought about it just because it was hot as shit, but I got a weird vibe from him and just politely declined. The truck continued on. Then there was a stop sign up ahead, with a little dirt turn around thing right before it. He pulled into it and turned around and headed back my way. When I saw him turn around, I didn't think anything of it. Maybe he missed his turn. Maybe he saw me walking and was concerned and, instead of turning, drove up to ask me if I needed a ride. Whatever. But when he got close to me, he slowed down a lot. Like obviously slowing down because of me. He didn't say anything, just slowed down and looked at me. I thought it was weird, but again, whatever. So I continued walking. I noticed he was coming back around another time. Again, he slows down. Now I am 100% freaked the fuck out. No normal sane person would be doing this. and paired with the initial shitty vibe I got, I knew something was wrong. I watch him turn around again, heading back towards me. I start thinking up a plan. I knew up ahead the stop sign was very forested and secluded. I knew if I continued up to that area, it would be the perfect place for this dude to grab me. I looked around. There was a nice little neighborhood, upper middle class homes. I thought perhaps I should go walk down that way and see if he follows me, or just wait it out until he thinks I've gone home. Still not having a concrete plan, I just continued walking. I hadn't passed the neighborhood yet, so I knew that was still an option if he continued creeping. So he comes back by me, always slowing down. I decide that this time if he turns around at the stop sign, I'm going to run into that neighborhood. Of fucking course, I see the dude turn around at the stop sign and start driving towards me. I walk as calmly as I can into the neighborhood. A Jeep had just pulled into the driveway and was unloading their things into their house. I run as fast as I can up to the couple. I tell them some creepy fuck is following me and ask if they could help me. They agreed to take me home. Literally a 5-minute drive from there. On the way there, the couple tells me they could also be crazy people and I should be more careful. I didn't even realize it at the time, but that was so true. Thankfully, they were not crazy people and helped me get home safely. I never found out anything about the guy, nor attempted to. I probably should have called the cops too. There were a lot of similar incidents on that road, which is why it got that nickname. I don't know what that guy had planned, but I know he was definitely planning to at least kidnap me. He was scoping me out, waiting for the perfect moment to grab me. Let's not fucking meet. Hey everyone, Hellraiser here, and thank you very much for listening to True Scary Stories, episode 89. First, I'd like to thank you all for the great feedback you gave me on yesterday's Pokemon video. It really was just a spur-of-the-moment thing, and, well, I'm not too proud to jump on a bandwagon, and I wanted to do it before everyone else had done Pokemon videos. I may actually do other themed videos like that in the future, not necessarily video game related, but, you know, just one-off ideas that I think are worth a look. They won't, of course, all be scary stories because I don't only do scary stories. That's just one aspect of my channel. And I was reading over the Pokemon forums there, and just there were some really fun stories, some really interesting ones. And I think the last one there about the person who hadn't really been out of their house much for 10 years, well, that was really uplifting to me, and I wanted to share it. Also, the special I uploaded the other day, that seems to be doing quite well, so I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you for all your likes and comments. And if you think anyone would enjoy it, same goes with all my videos, then please do share it on your social media, Facebook, Twitter, and anything else I may not have heard of yet. That really does help me out. It gets me more views, helps get me more subscribers, and helps the channel grow. So I'm always appreciative of those who do that. Let me think. Well, I think that's about it for now. No solid plans for the week, but we'll see what turns up. Obviously, there will be videos every day, because I'm usually able to get something up every day. Okay, so, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.